Intro. So, after any emotional incident, the general public tends to embellish whatever point they'd like to be true with a lot more merit than it really deserves. Emotion tends to cloud one's reasoning, and unfortunately, despite it being a cycle, people often don't wise up to it. Included in this is sometimes a few Debbie Downers who spend the day going, "Woe is me, what a world, nothing can be changed." It's sort of an aggressive apathy where they would rather wallow in misfortune than do anything about it, and they become upset at others around them that are trying to be more useful. One of the arguments for this narrative I heard shortly after the Boston bombing was that such incidents can't be influenced indirectly with things like education, since a lot are conducted by people with American educations. The point being that indirect means of altering these incidents, such as better mental health care, better education, lower poverty, increased financial options, etc., don't and can't work when it comes to lowering crime rate and mitigating terrorist incidents. One of the issues I find with such arguments is the narrative that little or nothing more can be done usually implies that current activities are at their highest possible peak. It's sometimes implied American education is of such amazing quality that if any indirect means would reduce the rate these incidents happened, then American education would entirely prevent them already. I consider that rather narcissistic, because in the real world, getting an education in the United States doesn't automatically grant this presupposed state of enlightenment. The quality can vary dramatically. There's a reason a lot of guys in poor areas turn to crime. It pays well. And if you've got a family to take care of, or you seek a life greater than flipping burgers at McDonald's until you find yourself in massive debt due to a health crisis, you're going to go over your options, which are drugs? Don't want to sell drugs. What about moving drugs? Don't want to move drugs. What about storing drugs? And options like that will appear. But what if you want to become an engineer and get paid six figures legitimately? Okay, how are you going to afford that degree if you don't want to be in massive student debt, which John Oliver did a segment on in Last Week Tonight, by the way? Drugs? And around the merry-go-round we go. One time during college, I was leaving the library, and a girl asked me to sign a petition. We'll call her Burnett. Two people had set up a table in front of the library and were collecting signatures. I asked what it was for and was told more money for senior health benefits. I took the form and started reading it, and before I had finished the first paragraph, the guy next to her, henceforth referred to as Dreadlocks, had obtained 5 signatures. I paused for a moment to observe. As it turns out, he had been using the line, "Sign a petition for healthcare," and people were immediately stopping to sign without reading it. The form basically wanted $500,000 for senior health benefits, but said nothing else. I asked Burnett where the money would be requisitioned from, and after a long pause she said, "I don't know what that means." Despite her being an adult, I explained I meant I wanted to know where the money would come from, and after another pause of several seconds, she got the attention of Dreadlocks and asked him. Now by this point, Dreadlocks had obtained a full page of signatures and was partway through the next, even though not 2 minutes had passed. He said the money was needed to improve healthcare, and I pointed out the form didn't say anything about how it would improve healthcare, where it would be spent, what kind of program it would be used on, what benefits it would provide, or where the money would come from. No information beyond the claim the money was needed was actually in it. So far, nearly every passersby had signed the petition, with the exception of some that had hurried past, and a young girl that we will refer to as Blondie. Blondie seemed to share my skepticism and stood next to me with her arms folded and asked how they can make a petition for money without knowing how it would be spent. Dreadlocks, completely ignoring my points, then gave a speech to Blondie about how important it was to make sure we're funding healthcare so we can better keep track of how the money is being spent and the importance of getting the money first, since only after you have the money can you make sure it's spent appropriately. I asked Burnett again where the money was supposed to come from, and she responded with, "The government." I asked her to be more specific and asked if she was proposing a new tax. Her response was a long, followed by avoiding eye contact. Over the course of what couldn't have been 10 minutes, they had obtained well over 100 signatures, with Blondie staring down Dreadlocks with a look of utter disapproval on her face, me deciding not to ask Blondie for her number because she was clearly a teenager, politely suggesting to Burnett that she consider the things I had listed to her before leaving so I didn't miss my bus. Remember, this wasn't on a beach with randoms. This was on a college campus, in front of a library, and most of the participants were adults. That is the grand enlightened Western education that prepares people for life in the real world and to understand the complicated issues a voting citizenry must decide on, and supposedly mentally fortifies them against the risk of being co-opted by malevolent entities. People who don't know what a tax is or the most basic principles of how government works. Sure, if you're at a particularly well-funded school or you get lucky, perhaps you'll experience better results from the education system, but a lot of paths don't include basic understanding of the world around you. People can go through most, sometimes all, their primary education without learning personal finance. It's not included in many degrees. I was never given the option to take an economics or business class in middle school or high school, much less compulsory, and there was that lovely incident I talked about in a previous video where a classroom full of mostly adult students in college said America was being intolerant by not printing all languages on signs, and I was called a racist for pointing out some didn't have written versions, because apparently assuming, quote-unquote, that some non-English languages might not have written versions indicated unfair prejudice. The fact is, you're disadvantaged without this information. Going through life without understanding how to balance one's own checkbook makes one vulnerable. One time, a girl was gossiping with me about her husband, specifically how bad he was with money. Even though she'd never finished college, she was significantly better at it than him, and after a few weeks we concluded it'd probably be better for her to control the household finances, even though her husband was the breadwinner, because he wanted to buy a house around his salary, but didn't even factor in food, water, or electricity expenses. He was not a stupid man, he had excellent tech qualifications, but he couldn't budget to save his life, and he hadn't thought to do any inspections for termites or plumbing. This sort of ineptitude hamstrings you. Your freedom as an entity is restricted, which is why I think it should be part of primary education that you understand before you reach voting age and leave high school. Did I have another point with all this? Painkillers? See you next time.